Your thoughts create your world. I try to eliminate my thoughts, control my thinking so that I can exist inside the divine, the Tao itself, and not have the presence of my selfish self whispering in my ear, telling me the the gains I can have in the world. I instead listen to the voice of the divine that has no sound so that I can, in Christian language, accumulate my treasure in heaven now.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master Sun Qing, and we have a master of ceremonies, perhaps, maybe I would say another offering from the universe, another profound moment. Every day I wake up saying, please share with me another experience with an incredible being that emits a frequency that's beyond time and space, and quite frankly, beyond this 3D reality. I want to welcome to the podcast Peter Panagore, the Master of Divinity. How are you, my friend?
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
This is a very exciting time that we're sort of like getting to on a daily, this realization of this frequency that seems to be turning out psychics, mediums, channelers, healers, and they're coming in basically flocks of this awakening. And I've never seen it before. In 30 years, I've never seen this much. Like 30 years ago, the stuff we're talking about today, you could possibly get a little cup with some pills in it, a straitjacket, and you're going straight for a psych evaluation. Whereas today, it seems to be who, where, what, and how. And moreover, I want you to share with our audience a little bit more of a backstory of where you came from to how you are here today, and the experience. Your near death is always a great catalyst for, there's something greater, and then it triggers into all these incredible things to where you are sharing and healing and offering all this incredible consciousness in 2024. Please share, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, so before I died in 1980 and again in 2015. But as a child, I had mystical tendencies. I had a series of mystical experiences that taught me very young that the reality in which I lived was only a small portion of a much larger reality, and that I had a task, that I was inhabiting this body with a job. And my job was to work for the unspeakable, unnameable, uh, all being powerful. And I could tell you how that all came to be in the experiences that I had. But I want to summarize all of my childhood and say that I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, but I had an experience of Ganesh when I was 6. I had an experience of an angel taking me out of my body when I was 5, and then a whole series of things happened to me until the day that I died. And the day that I died was from ice climbing. I was 20 years old. I was in Western Canada in the Rocky Mountains. I was there by choice. I was an outdoors mountaineering kind of person, ski patrol, winter guy, backpacking my whole life. And I made a mistake in my gear, and that mistake cost me my life. I'm here, obviously, I survived, but I died and crossed over. And that impact that had on me was, well, the first thing that happened when I came back was that nothing here was real to me anymore, except for the energy that made all this frailty exist. There was this perceivable with my eyes and my ears. I could smell it, I could taste it, I could feel it. All of my senses were one sense, as they were when I was dead. It came back with me, and so my whole perception of reality was that it was only temporary, and that my real reality was where I had just come from when I was dead, come back to life, and that's where I'm from, and that's where I'm going, and it's beauty and love beyond expression, and that loss that I had when I came back. I was depressed and alone, and struggled for decades by myself with this, because just as you said, in the old days, back in the 70s, and the 80s, nobody knew about near-death experience. And there was a couple of books being published, but it was not a subject that people discussed, and so I kept it to myself for fear of being thought crazy. But it was all of my interior reality. So I changed the course of my life. I was an English major undergraduate, going to be a graduate student in architecture to join the family business. My sister was in grad school at the time, one of my sisters in architecture. And after what happened to me, my whole life turned inside out and upside down. I decided to get an MDiv, Master of Divinity, went to Yale University to study mysticism, which is not really what they taught there. But if you're resourceful and you look across the university, you can find classes to put the whole thing together. And I had a dean of admission, the dean of students allowed me a 3-year independent study so that I could research the history of contemplation and mysticism, primarily in the West, so that I could understand the language of the mystical culture, which was heretical in a lot of places, and certainly on the outside, not in the mainstream, but there's a lot of it. And I was on the hunt for technique. I knew enough from my Christian background that there's a lot of there's not a whole lot of how to do it. Um,
Yeah. Even
but I
to
Go
even
ahead.
today, I mean, I was just gonna say even today, there's a how to do it, but I mean, it's like, I bumped into someone on the subway, fell and bumped my head. I had this angel come down and give me the code to ultimate healing. There's a lot of that going on right now. Now, that's the part where I get excited because there is an awakening, yet is there is there? Because is it repeatable, and how much of it can you validate in your 3D reality? Because we are by nature creatures of habit, and human beings, if you perceive yourself as that before you awaken to a greater sense of realization, must start and finish things. This is the heteroaction of what you do, is understanding there is a beginning and end, representative of a duality that creates this desire that you must finish something you started. Is an introspective analytical sort of processes. So you looking for something that actually a method, a system that actually works, is very intriguing to me, because right now you could throw a dart somewhere and there's a thousand people that have found the system. Yet the consensus that I find, and more people that I experience and interview, is I always come down to show me. All the rest of it is conceptual, and as a human being, you want to validate it. You want it to be real, and so show me what it is. So I'm excited for this next level. You've gone to Yale, and now we're going into where are you finding these mechanisms?
In the Yoga Sutras. So
Yes.
before I got to Yale, after I died, I came back with this extra energy dose, chi, and this chi was, well, it was visible to me. And I was undergraduate. I went back to the University of Massachusetts, where I was also, in addition to my major, studying theater. And my mime teacher, pantomime teacher, was in the school of Marcel Marceau. He was the student of a student of Marcel Marceau. Marcel Marceau taught Hatha Yoga, and my teacher was a Kung Fu Chi, uh, not a master at the time, but on his way. He now is. He's in his 80s. He's still a friend of mine. But one day in class, every class began with Hatha Yoga. And so I'm also going to say this. I grew up in this culture where Hatha Yoga was unknown. Okay, so I had no idea what it was, but I came across the Yoga Sutras. I read them, and they're basically a manual on how to train your mind. And then when I was in this class, kind of simultaneously, our teacher had us in this particular yoga posture and cupping a hand underneath our navel chakra and our other hand in this form, and then making a chi ball making a chi ball, making it up, and then stretching it like taffy. And for me, it was a physical. It was this taffy was it was physical. I could see it. I could feel it. It was this energy beam that I was stretching. And when he asked the class, "Anybody feel anything?" A buzz, a warmth, a tingle. I said, "Me." So he called me up in front of the class and had me kneel down and close my eyes. And he knelt across from me. And then he said, "Put up your hands like this." And he said, "What do you feel?" I said, "I feel this. I feel this, this, this." And he said, "Now open your eyes." I opened my eyes, and he was sitting with his palms this far from my hand. And I looked at the class, everybody's jaw dropped jawed. And he said to me, "How did you learn to do that?" I said, "I don't know." I wasn't telling anybody that I had died. And
Mm.
so I then knew that I could use hatha yoga with, and I had some Kriya and Kundalini, Kriya yoga from the Yoga Sutras, and Kundalini had a Kundalini teacher at the same time. This is back in 1980. And I realized and recognized that I could cultivate this energy. Christianity doesn't have much in the realm of cultivation, it has a lot in the realm mystically of the negation of attachment to the egoic self. There's a long history of that, and that's super effective. That actually pervades all cultures mystically. Everybody's that's what from my I don't practice qigong or tai chi, but the physical motion and the mind and the breath all tied together gives one access to the subtle body.
Mm.
And that subtle body I have practiced in cultivation. uh, for as I practice my centering of myself and my quietude to detach myself from my egoic mind, in order to um, turn my inner eye backward and see where I was from. I could see when I came back, I never fully re-inhabited my body. Most of me, for most of my life, now even true, I live above myself. And I always know my consciousness inhabits this biological robot. But I was in desperation here, and because I was bereft of this place of healing and wholeness, truth, understanding, oneness, love, light, bliss, paradise, joy, all these things, truth, were one thing. And I had a little bit of it, but I knew that the little bit I had was a thimbleful compared to the universe size of it, and I wanted it. And so my desperation and my uh, isolation drove me into a regular practice, a dedicated, ritualized practice of hours a day of Kriya yoga, energy yoga, and centering practice to step aside so that I'm not in my own way. And I found that as I read further east and west into the Upanishads and the Vedas, and I'm a huge fan of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu, I found in the literature that there were teachers who understood singleness, who understood oneness, and the Buddha included, and Jesus included, um, and the pursuit of that oneness what became the point of my life because that's what I experienced on the other side. I want I want that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a similarity. I mean, I don't know whether the audience remembers what you said, but you mentioned Ganesh. Are you referring to Ganesh or Ganesh?
I'm referring to the elephant god.
Yes, yes, yeah. It's funny. I had a guy on the podcast a couple of months ago who's sort of fresh face in out of body training, and he's straight out of India or somewhere. He lives somewhere in India, and um, when I was looking at his aura, this whole shape shifting transformation of Ganesh through his field was very evident. And then he was just sort of hanging out into space. So we went through experiencing the auric field of that entity from a
Mm.
perspective of validating that. And so when you said Ganesh, I was like, oh. I can see he's coming right in quite clearly. Good old Ganesh, and the relevance of the power of that particular spirit entity sort of is reflected on many things. Latsu, I started channeling Latsu over 30 years ago. It was one of my first experiences, and to this day is sort of like my mentor from a second by
Cool.
second basis that I share information with at a high. What his access would be probably what people are very familiar with. They call it Akashic records. It's a sense of consciousness to all things, like accessing all information at once. It's just he comes in that form. He's quite clear, gives me insight, and I use that on a second by second basis. Or moreover, I'll do a channeling where I share the transmission of him directly through my physicality, giving answers to questions that people have over the social media sphere of reality. So when you use these sutras, I'm not very familiar with yoga sutras or any sort of yoga or internal alchemy. And so this is very interesting to me. I teach Qigong, moving energy with your mind, Qigong, moving energy with your breath. These ancient Taoist practices go deep, 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 developing what we call the dantians, which is basically, in translation, energy field. These dantians within the physical body are what we focus on as Taoists to create longevity in this reincarnation, saturating the physical body with this energetic element. I mean,
Same.
right. So I'm really excited. I'm curious because I want to know. I'm not going to even claim to understand or know anything about this system. How is it? What are the principles? What's the depth of cultivation, and how do you acquire it?
Acquire it by practice.
Yes, absolutely.
And that it turns out that it's its own energetic teacher.
Mm,
So the Self-Realization Fellowship is one of the major Kriya Yoga groups. I'm
okay.
not associated with them. I was in an odd position. I found that I needed to my compulsion for pursuit of this energetic self was such that I needed to find a way to earn a living while I was pursuing this full time. And so I went into Christianity as a profession, as a minister. I was a reverend, and I continued my interior work. But as a reverend, I had to isolate myself from the Eastern traditions for fear of losing my profession. But what I discovered was that if I used my spine and as my superhighway for my breath and my mind, if I learned to control my mind, the running of my mind with my breath, not forcing it to stop, but using my mind against itself with repetitive chanting. I still use the same chant, and placing my mind inside of where the chakras are, from my back to my front and on the interior, not naming them, not knowing their colors, not knowing what they do, just the practice of using my body and my breath to bring my mind to these locations. And over decades of practice, they each individually opened and connected and expanded into one. And in my mime class, the way I learned to do this was you probably have heard of the warrior stances. So you get your knee tucked out, you have a right angle, your foot's on the floor, and your leg is at a right angle, and your other leg is behind you, and you're standing. And there's a particular form of that where if you turn over to your thigh, bring your hands together out like this, and then bend your body over so that your chest is touching your thigh. And you have this long line of the body. I learned, because I had this access to this energy, I found it in my foot and would ride it up my spine and push it into my hands. And so 40 years ago, I began this practice of pushing it into my hands, you've probably seen the palm with the eyeball on it.
Well, within Taoism, we call these Lao Gong points. So they're energy center points. Moreover, for the audience, the first entry point for sensory perception, because it has the largest neural network in the body, the hands and the feet, the head. That's why most people generally start feeling tingling energy in these center points as
Cool.
an entry level of realization. But yeah, we call them Lao Gong points. This is the Ba Hui, which is the entry to earth from the heavens. But I mean, that's all very basic. And once you raise that frequency, ooh, all bets are off, my friend.
Well, I came back that way,
Yeah.
and then I worked at it for the rest of my life. It I find that my near-death experience is mineable. If I bring myself back through my memory of it, which is a weird thing because I didn't have a brain when I was there. So there's some interface that happens. My consciousness comes back in. I bring myself back into it. I practice my Kriya energy practices. They expand the space inside myself. I bring heaven here to me now. And I live inside of this bubble of energy that doesn't solve my problems or prevent me from spilling the water and breaking the glass. But what it does do is with every breath that I take and every choice that I make, as I continue to cultivate my emptiness, I lean closer and closer, travel closer and closer to the energy source itself, which strips away more and more of me. The I channel too. I channel when I'm channeling now. I channel when I enter back into the space. I use it in my daily life. When I meet people, I hug. I'm a hugger, but I'm not a hugger because I'm like super sweet. Maybe I am. People tell me, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm reaching around their back to feel their energy field from the back behind their heart because there's this sense that has expanded outside of me that can feel at a distance now. It's a singular sense, and as long as I stay out of the way of it, it continues to provide me with information. And that information is primarily itself, the presence of its own being in everything that I meet, everyone I meet. So systematically, I developed my own processes by breathing. I began by breathing into my navel and up to my crown, pardon me, my brow, and back and forth and back and forth. And then I continued to follow its lead. I found that the energy itself is the big guru for me. I follow it as it leads me inside my own energy pursuit inside myself. And I've about 2 years ago, began my process of trying to systematize it in a way that I can tell people how to do it. So I run a group once a week. We got like 50 people or so who are helping me understand how to teach what I've learned, because this all happens non-linguistically. I'm not using my language mind to be in my chakras. I'm using my awareness mind and my breath and my body in combination to stop my mind so that I can just be inside the energy itself.
Mm.
I imagine it's very similar. I had a friend who was a Tai Chi person, and he'd been practicing for 25 years, and he had energy. He had this radiant energy, and we met in that area. That's where his energy and my energy were brothers.
Yeah. 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 It's an interesting sort of, I kind of define, I mean, when I give myself the title of Taoist master, it just generally just means I'm a lineage holder of two sects of Taoism. One,
I understood that.
yeah, I mean you understand that, but I mean in essence, one's a 66th generation, and the other one's 126th generation. Now, what does that all mean? Really, not that much unless I can show someone. So I tend to teach people, and it goes under one blanket sort of like realization. It's all sensory perception. So if I'm teaching you psychic stuff, channeling, healing, mediumship, any of these sensory perceptions up and above the five that you're born into this world with, it's all bets are off. If you have an imagination, you can pretty much create anything. Now, within the systems that you and I have started or created our development in, that's always a good baseline. And then you sort of break free of that and sort of expose a much bigger, as Tom Campbell would say, a larger consciousness system, where once you had a frequency and you obtain that through a vibration, pretty much you can access anything. So, when I teach people psychic sort of stuff, it's like you do the drive-by readings where you just look at someone and in 3 seconds later, you're giving them their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual summary and profile. And they're like, how the hell do you even know anything about me? And, well, it's just information. And so one of the things of clear senses that I sort of acquired over 30 years ago was I woke up one day after a specific processes, because there's a training. My vision was just a computer screen with 1,000 icons. So everything I look at has an aura, has a field, has information, and I just focus my attention, intention, and it gives me the information that's relevant. And that sort of like, at first it was overwhelming. I spent about a week or two going, I don't know whether I even want this stuff. It's kind of like nuts, because my aura was so palpable that, I'm walking around with a bubble. And so I'm bumping into people that it would seem like 1,000 miles away from me, but I'm bumping into their auras. I'm looking at their auras, their field. They can feel me pushing against them as if I have a rubber suit around my physical body. And again, this sort of like sensory perception is a developmental skill. You mentioned Kundalini. We have a thing called infinite Wuji body that evokes what we call the sacred infinite flower. And through that, there's a system going deep within each dantian. There's 81 chambers within each dantian. You reveal this evoking of. So to access true magnetic fluidity, which is the palpable stuff that can affect change in a 3D reality, because you want to see a healing, manifestation, magic. This is all conceptual in our minds until we can validate it in a 3D reality. It's like, oh, the stories are endless, the experiences are endless, but what is it that we can bring to the table? So part of Qigong, which is being able to operate in all dimensions at once, that's the mastery of it. It's like a supercharged steroid version of multitasking, so that you can access energy, frequency, vibration in all dimensions instantaneously. I mean, as you say, you're channeling. Myself, I'm just sitting in the universe, sampling all the energies of every specific constellation, sun, star. And, as I say, the sun, it ripples through my body. You get a charge through your physical body, and you're like, oh, we're interconnected. Absolutely, because there is no distance between us other than your perception. But in reality, that magnetic fluidity is the super glue of all things. From a very young language that I wouldn't even try and parallel to something as ancient as the Chinese language that I operate in, that's the transformation of Mandarin today, that goes way back to bone oracle reading and pictographs that were generated by the Yellow Emperor over 10,000 years ago. We have a whole different language. Science is sort of like, oh, we have the answer. It's ones and zeros, and there's a mathematical sum for all things. And, this 0 point energy that they talk about within the unified field is the answer to how we're able to connect, how I can connect with Peter, Peter can connect with me, we connect with the universe, all things are realized. Well, there is no end. If I am you and you are me, what am I afraid of? The catalyst for your discontent or limit of your abilities, my observation, my realization, is the emotion. And so the human experience, the subject of that in your natural born life, is part of your experience. But when you master it, the way Peter and I master it, you're able to take on and off your personality like a pair of a pair of underwear. And so you can put your emotions in the corner of the room, which is what the first thing I teach someone with. If they're entering into this mystical, magical realization, then they're going to start training. The first thing you need to do is master your emotions. Your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. It's a simulation that you can put in the corner of the room and go, hey, sit, roll over, play dead, and I'll get back to you when necessary, because the present moment for a healing, which I'm very familiar with. Maybe it's, as Tom would say, just the consciousness system giving me the validation of probabilities, but I've experienced nothing but what someone would perceive as one profound physical healing after another for over 30 years. I've seen thousands of them. There isn't anything I haven't seen. Bone fusing in front of my very eyes, flesh opening and closing in front of my very eyes, tumors disappearing. That's my regular. Now I'm not in any way expecting that, nor am I so confident that I'm not embracing a miracle every time I say it, but it's just a daily reoccurrence. And it's that frequency that you attain to realize that. And so people are like, wow, point in check. I always reference this, and the last thing that comes to my mind is the two of my kids running around chasing each other. One tackled one, the other one ate dirt. They get up, their face is the size of a watermelon. And, I don't use anything more than that magnetic fluidity, but I'm not bringing title to it. So I'm not sitting there in a lotus position with 3 incense, calling in my guides, asking for a greater sense of understanding. Because I am the universe, I know this. I don't pretend to know it. I know it. I'll look at that and change the frequency and go heal, 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 heal. That's a really simple incantation that you probably could have got it like a simple and safe way down the street in relation to the linguistics. And with that, you will bear witness to a physical healing where that swollen lip will disappear before your very eyes. How I see it is the tissue, and how anyone sees it is the tissue wiggles and mutates. And it's sort of, and when I was talking to Tom about this, there's a fundamental way that the data is coming in, that it transforms, and it has everything to do with my attention intention, because that creates a probability that may be 1,000,000 to 1, but the second you inject your attention intention and you're creating something as the field meeting something equal to or greater than, it's realized in a physical healing. And so this type of stuff is, last week, grandma's in a coma, she's going to die. The doctor said she's going to die. Poof, don't worry about it, it's done. Next day, grandma wakes up, vitals are regulated, and we live happily ever after. Now, that's funny because that's stuff that I'm used to, but even Tom is quite familiar with that stuff. And he goes, yeah, physical healing is easy. This is the type of stuff that you tune into, but you have to have a knowing. The doubt is the catalyst of the albatross of all things. And I mean, we go back to what Peter and I are speaking about, which is the cultivation and the certainty, the knowing that's generated from this repeatable experience that you get into. And, with Peter, the near-death experience activated his energetic body to a level up and beyond anyone that he had exposed himself to. And that transmission is just evident every day that he comes back to it. It becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And I mean, that's part of that shrinking. Like, the all ritual and practice that I've been trained in, that are thousands of year old practices, I can, 30 years ago, yeah, it was something that I would sit down and go, I need to read a list and I'm going to go through the practice. I'm going to, it might take me 20 minutes, half an hour. That same ritual is realized in about a fraction of a picosecond, because it's a concept. That's the mastery. There's one thing that you can't get out of the physical, anywhere near the mastery of a spiritual consciousness. That stuff only accumulates itself. I have students that I've had for 15 years, and they're like, just when I thought the energy couldn't get any stronger, it just gets stronger every single day. It doesn't let up. It doesn't dissipate. It doesn't go anywhere. Peter could go away and have a sabbatical and just sort of be in himself and go to the Bahamas, hang out, not do anything. And the second he puts his intention to his training, it just comes on in 100 times stronger than it was the last time, because it hasn't gone anywhere. You just haven't brought your attention to it, which would be the present moment. What are your thoughts of all that? I kind of just hit you with a bunch of different things going on here, but share more with the audience.
Well, I find that it never decreases, it always only increases. and that if I walk away, as you say, for a period of time, and I've had to, during when my kids were tiny, or when I get sick and I can't practice, um, I come back to it, and it's not only there; it continues to grow. It has, it has, it has a life of its own beyond my own physical body. It is who I am, and it has, um, well, it has power over my physical form if I allow it to have that. I practice getting out of the way of it. My pursuit has been less in the physical healing end of things as it has been in the negation of self in order to become uh, a voice and channel of it in and of itself,
Hmm.
and letting it do its own thing. So I haven't spent much of my life in pursuit of what I think I could do, but my orientation isn't really here. I've been very hopeful. I've my half of my career was directly hands-on helping people in our communities. That's what my church ministry was. The hungry, the poor, the naked.
I gotta say one little thing.
Sure.
Um, I'm I may be confess being a Taoist priest, but one of my all-time favorites, and it's probably cringeworthy. The audience hear it over and over again, but I'm going to say it again. One of my all-time favorite pastors is Joel Osteen, and so people are like, "Oh my goodness, oh what a charlatan!" No, if you understand anything about channeling, that dude gets up there and he transmits a frequency from his version of God and Jesus like you ain't never seen before.
That's why
And
this place is packed.
he evokes change. And there's one of my favorite hobbies. My hobbies is visit every place of worship possible. I don't care where it is, whether it's some rinky
Mm.
dinky little church in the middle of Memphis, or I'm in like a cathedral somewhere in the middle of New York City. I want to experience that essence. And what is really a collective? Are we really an organized religion, or are we really transmitting a higher frequency of God, or Jesus, or Tao, or Buddha, or Ganesh, or an eternal, immortal frequency that is evident and similar to repeatable, that would be referenced to the universe? It doesn't matter what it is, in my opinion. But in most of these situations in places of worship, you get this sort of like my team's better than your team.
Yeah,
And this
well,
is sort of like a humanist sort of thing.
it's very
And
tribal.
right. And for me, all teams are equal. I always remind my students or anyone that I ever come across, when you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. And
Yeah,
so,
I don't have a belief system.
right, right.
I came back with no belief system. I came back with knowing the nameless, unspeakable, infinite, and multiple layers of my own original self. And so all of my belief systems were erased. I chose to work in Christianity because it was the nearest and most secure disguise I could wear while I continued my interior pursuit. It
Mhm.
was and as I acted as a minister in the communities in which I lived, I brought the energy of the divine that had no name with me as I worked.
Mm.
I kept my mouth shut about it, but that didn't mean it wasn't leaking out left and right and all over the place,
So
causing me. Pardon?
I was going to say, so your relationship, even though it's quite evident that there's high frequency, just phosphorus, divine light transmitting from your very being right now, but there's still evidence of Jesus in your field, whether you've talked
Oh,
him aside or
I'm
he's
not a
not,
believer in him. I'm not a believer in
really,
him,
it's interesting because he's quite apparent.
but
In
I am definitely know him.
Right, right. Well, I mean, maybe normally when someone shape shifts like that, and I see a very clear indication of the presence of an entity that is moreover greater than your physical form, there's a relationship there that is sort of like transmuted into your very action, your very processes, and maybe that healing aspect of Jesus is quite clear. But I mean, he's not leaving your side. Normally, there's a clearer path other things that are going on, but your auric field sort of stays in this very phosphorus gold white light, which is representative, from my experience, of just a higher frequency, a divine sense, and your aura sort of ripples between a celestial purple color to a bright blue, and then you're sort of going in and out of that stuff, and then of course Jesus is coming in and out quite clearly. But I mean, again, the fact that you know him, and it may be not something that you call upon him, he seems to have found that you like him to some degree, because he's
I
not dull.
do. I have many teachers, but he's the one I spent most of my life teaching from.
Interesting.
And but more importantly, my mantra, my chant is the Jesus prayer. So for the last 40 years, I've used his name and allowed it to used it as a tool to stop the flow of my thoughts and attachment to my emotions or my memories,
Mm.
and to use it to access the quietness of my breath.
Mm.
So he's a big feature in my life, but he's not the fullness of the oneness itself. He's a portion thereof.
Well, yeah. I mean, in my opinion, from my experience, it's a facet, right? It's just like
Yeah, right,
how Ganesh is morphing in and out of your
right.
field right now with 144,000 elephants, which is bizarre to me, all representative in a sort of gray pink color. It looks like a freaking army, quite frankly. And that is very strong in your field right now, man. Maybe you're connecting with that. That seems to be some type of like frequency that you relate to. I'm not too clear. I've only had one or two conversations with Ganesh, but he presents some type of like frequency or transmission that people use and share in this 3D reality. What's the relationship with Ganesh?
So when I was 6, on the day that my dad accidentally ran over my dog, and I was in a great state of grief, and I witnessed it. And in the middle of the night, this is a year after my first out of body journey into heaven. I awoke in my bed and I sat up, but I was still lying down. And everything in my room was sepia tone, including me. And I looked down at my feet, and they were also this sort of sepia tone. So I looked at myself and I saw my body in the bed. And as I sat there, I heard my name being called. Peter, 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 come to me, come to me, come to me. And I recognized the voice. So I stood up, but my feet never touched the floor. And I moved toward the door, and the door was open a little bit because I was afraid of the dark in those days, and the hall light would have been on when I had gone to sleep. And when I got to the door, I couldn't grab the knob. I couldn't open the door, and the voice laughed and said, "Pass through the door. Just pass through the door." So I passed through the door and I came to the top of our stairs, and our stairs they were L-shaped with a landing. And on the landing was this little tiny elephant, my size, is as tall as me, and dressed in Indian garb. And I was a kid from Boston, Irish Catholic, Greek Orthodox, waspy sort of family. I didn't know anything about this. But as it looked at me, its eyes were pure beauty. They were dark, they were black, but they emitted and emoted this gloriousness, and it called to me and waved me down with its trunk. And so I floated down the stairs to it, and when I got to it, looking at it eye to eye, I flew into its eye. I became small and flew in, or it became large, and I flew into its eye. And when I was inside of it, there was this vast space of wisdom.
Mhm.
Wasn't my wisdom. I was in the ocean of wisdom, the ocean of knowledge, the ocean of welcome and understanding. And then I was brought out of it, and this it's speaking to me telepathically, and it said, "Go outside." And I'm like, "I can't go outside. My mom and dad are going to get angry." It said, "No, go outside. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me." And so I went down the stairs. It stayed behind me, but it also stayed with me because it was talking inside my head. I passed through the doors. I went out to the street, and we lived outside of Boston in a small city, and we lived next to a large, very large woodland backed up to the house. And so there weren't a lot of lights where I happened to live. And I was told to look up at the sky. So I looked up at the sky and I could see all of the stars. And then I saw infinity. I was pulled from this energetic self of me was pulled into the universe, and I was exposed to the almighty power of all things there is, and it scared me, and I was immediately back in my body again.
Hmm.
And uh, that I had already learned as a child the year before not to tell anybody about these kinds of experiences because I didn't have any language for it, and it caused me trouble the first time it happened, and so I kept this to myself. But I had experienced inside of the beingness of Ganesh, who I didn't have a name for decades. I didn't there was no language. The communication that I described wasn't like words. It was like a knowledge inside of me being spoken. But when I was inside of this entity, in this vast darkness, which was beauty, I understood the safety of it and the security of it, even though I was alone in there.
Yeah, it's really profound. I mean, what he's translating to me, and I never really sort of associated him having a form either male or female, but I guess it's male. But
I
that,
don't I know well, I use the he, but I don't know.
yeah, I mean, well, that's just the sentiment that's being transferred right now. It's more his deeper understanding of these sutras and the mastery that you're experiencing and how you acquired these skills were very much from your interconnection with him and his guidance. And then, moreover, this
Mm,
this vision of Buddha, but not in a sort of an abstract non-duality form, but very clearly as a woman. This energy is very apparent in your field, riding one of these 144,000 elephants that seem to be your protectors or something of that nature. Now, whether we need protection or not is another story. Personally, it is only generated from fear, and fear is a catalyst for the need of protection, realizing that you are me, I am you. These sort of like epiphany realizations sort of come in all different ways, shapes, and form. As Tom would say, the large consciousness system is just giving you what you need right now. And I would agree
yeah.
that that would be very clear. So this sort of relationship with Ganesh seems to be a lot deeper than just a childhood experience.
It never goes away. All of the mystical experiences that I've had are still doorways inside of me. They've left a mark inside of me. They stay with me, and I found through the practice of recollection, remembering, and meditation, and my Kriya Yoga and Kundalini practice, the that they become my teachers, that they give me access to the wisdom that was granted to me in those experiences that comes along with this humility that allows me access to it. I found that when I brought my own egoic self to the equation, I created a barrier to this. And the more I remove myself from it, the greater access I have to all of these portals that were kind of left inside of me through all of these experiences. And so I
Right,
have all these experiences, but I cultivate them.
right. It's nuts. It's like this sort of mist red mist that's being emitted through your aura right now. What's the color red so relevant to you?
I've never really understood, other than being in the colors, their meanings. They, the my in my direct experiences of the chakras, the the colors of the chakras are aren't they represent themselves. There's no, I don't make meaning out of them, so I don't really know what red means for me. I
Yeah, it's just that
feel it.
that mist that he emits from your field, he's using it with like a cauldron of like what seems to be like red rubies in this sort of like it looks like an urn. And he's sort of like waving it around your aura, which I find really interesting. Hang on a second. I don't know who that is. 1 second, decline. Are you there? There we go. I don't know what happened. The phone turned it off. Yeah, he's kind of reeling that. I mean, that would be more representative if I looked at your field. There's definitely a level of um, parameters, boundaries that you set within your own relationships in this physicality. It's
I
sort of,
do.
you're very much, you like to create that space, a sacred space, an area that's necessary for you to cultivate, for others to cultivate. And it's no bono. I'm really bad Spanish. No comprende when it comes to people overstepping their boundaries. That's not part of your programming. Programming.
Well, I've had people overstep their boundaries with me in my professional life in such a way that involved criminality, and that it demanded me to maintain the interior space of me, the boundary of myself, in
Mm.
order to move through the physical world in a way that um, I could overcome the evil that they were throwing at me, and it was pretty bad. It wasn't. It's not little tiny stuff. It's pretty big, and I found that the only place I don't have a boundary, or that I've been practicing eliminating the boundary, is the interior connection to my home. And the more that that boundary is reduced by expansion, the easier it is for me to function in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like a crossover. I just want the audience to always remember when you're reading, it's kind of like getting blood work. When you read people's auras, there's within Taoism, you read the Dantian possesses a emotion and virtue, and the real goal of synchronization is to acquire the virtue over the emotion, and that's through regulating a synchronicity within the energetic field, and then it sort of like unravels itself. So that just happens to be one component that's elevated. I mean, if I go up the list, we can pick out more, but I mean, that's for another day. This is just within the information that's within your field. It sort of transmutes out into all different levels,
I
as
see what you're saying.
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I
And
do.
so, again, I always tell people, sometimes I'm out here in Nevada, Las Vegas, so sometimes for fun, I'll go down to the strip and do covert drive-by readings, and people are like, "Oh," I said, "Can I give you a reading?" And they're like, "Oh, sure, Magic Man, give me a reading." Yeah. And the thing that really perplexes people to a point of their jaw dropping to the ground is, I don't know you. I've known
Yeah.
you for 1.3 seconds, yet I could give you the in depth understanding of your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual state through just reading the information. It's got nothing. The reason that I find it, and I'm going to attribute it to this, it's this simple. It's that present moment. I'm not invested in it. I don't have any
Right.
emotional outcome. So, one of the biggest ways to acquire healing or high levels of consciousness is never to be invested in the outcome. And so, I just sort of look at it just at face value. Oh, here it is. And I've been doing this, and I've done it thousands upon thousands and thousands and thousands of times, that it's validated within my very knowing that this information is absolutely palpable and real, and it's a repeatable thing, just like a physical healing. And it just depends, like the system gives you what you need right now. And your insight and cultivation of internal alchemy practices is really profound. Just the understanding of that and how you acquire it, how the system gave you attention. Hey, let me show you what it's like to be dead. And then, oh, wow. Now, do you hear what I'm saying? Am I screaming it loud and clear enough for you to realize the understanding of how powerful you really are, your ability to access the other side? And now you bring that back. And so, why am I giving you this insight? Because that charge that you and I just experienced right now is that realization. And they're like, oh, how do you know that? I just see the aura. It's like, oh, the aura is there. Oh, I feel it. The whole point of it is you and I are giving people insight to consciousness. That's why we're here, in my opinion.
I
I don't
agree.
want to speak
It's,
for you.
no, you're speaking for me.
And I don't want to
You
like
are.
put words in your mouth, but I mean that's the
Yeah.
purpose of our
That's what I'm doing.
place in this cycle of realization is to help people aware that it's out there, aware of the power within them. And by experiencing and immersing themselves in the teachings of Peter or myself, you come to this realization and you go, wow.
And then it's yours.
Yes.
And then you have it.
Oh, this is what I love. I love what you're saying, my friend, because one of the things I always remind people of is when you develop these skills, they're yours forever.
Yeah.
You're not something that it comes and goes. It's like, oh, I worked out in the gym and I lost 20 pounds. And no, this is when you talk about consciousness, it's a whole super roided out version of reality that is not within the physicality. It's not in the 3D material. And so you're leveling up. It accumulates on itself. It never dissipates, which is unlike the 3D where if you don't continually focus on something as simple as nurturing a physical, and that's why when you master the consciousness, the physical is easy. So within Taoism we saturate the physical to create longevity. So what we do is you come into the world, there's three major treasures: Jing, Qi, and Shen. Shen being spirit, Qi being the energy, and Jing being the constitution, the life force that you were created and brought into this reality with. And normally a battery pack of the average person that comes into this life will be determined by their DNA makeup, their expression, all things of that nature that gives you the constitution of who you are. And until otherwise told, the hereditary sort of like you're a victim to your genetic disposition is nothing more than that. People don't realize that, that's just the starting point. Once you realize you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, things shift and change as the consciousness shifts and change. But the physicality, let's just say the battery's 100%. And when you come into the world, the dice that was rolled for you, you're at about 75%. That's just what you were born into the world with. So if you had to measure up against the rest of the population, you're about 75% of 100. And so the beautiful part about Taoist internal alchemy practices is you can take that 75 to 100, and from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 1,000,000, and maintain that level of saturation throughout your whole natural born life. That's how we obtain what we call the immortal sort of longevity aspect of Taoism, is to stay there. And so you nurture the physicality so that you can get more levels up, more reps on your consciousness in this reincarnation. And so that's generally how you do it from a cultivation practice within Taoism. And, recorded in the last probably couple of thousand years, Taoist masters in the numbers of 150, 300, 400 years of age. And that's really just a tipping point, quite frankly. That's really nothing. We are limitless. We are abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And if you truly believe that, then all bets are off. Then you can start sort of like transmitting this sort of admission into reality. And you get grandpa, who's 110, who takes a fifth of whiskey every day and smokes five packs of cigarettes. And everyone's like, what gives? How does this guy, who literally disregards his well-being and is attempting to destroy his life force, lives to 110 and is as happy as a pig in shit? What is that? How is that working? And that really fundamentally comes down to what, Tom and I concluded with in the realization, the simplicity, dumbing all this down. Is your glass half full or empty? That's it. Where are you at in your realization of what you're experiencing? Are you perceiving it as profound and an amazing moment of positivity, or are you perceiving it in a more limited sort of contractive state of negativity that just comes with the duality that we live in? And so, people always measure Taoism and Buddhism as two of the same things. They're very, very different. They sort of categorize it as an Eastern philosophy. And quite frankly, very few people know anything about Taoism because we've been subject to lots of death and destruction over the centuries, over the thousands of years, and especially the last couple of hundred from a dictator by the name of Mao, who created a level of genocide that makes the Holocaust look like a drop in the ocean. He's murdered 60 or 70 million of his own citizens in the name of it just doesn't work for me. And now, of course, he is no longer with us, but just the idea that he operated in that. And one of the side effects was erase the face of the earth of all Taoist practitioners, because they are the answer to the alchemy. And we have been the guide and consultant to every emperor in the history of Chinese culture as we know it, have always had the Taoist alchemist as the vision into this level of cosmos that cannot be attained by the average person that doesn't cultivate in these sort of practices. And so, my goodness, we have this level of Buddhism, Taoism. It's not even the same. A Buddhist life is a pile of dirt covered in diamonds, and they spend their whole natural born life taking another diamond off, looking for more dirt. Let's get all the pain and suffering. Let's wring it out. Let's suffer it. Let's endure this misery, and then we just throw this avatar away and get a new one and move on to the next reincarnation. Now, that's a beautiful one. You can literally create your reality any way you want, and that happens to be one way. And they use it, and in my personal opinion, abuse it, but that's for them to do. They can do anything they want, and they can be the master of that realization. Whereas a Taoist perception of reality is fundamentally not even in the same ballpark. We look at life as a pile of diamonds covered in dirt. You take off some more dirt, find another diamond. Oh, everything is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And you just keep cultivating that. One of the pursuits of the Yellow Emperor, when he was given this insight from the universe thousands of years ago, was his pursuit of internal alchemy and energetics. And so he was a naughty boy in some ways in the way that he transmuted that energy, because he was using it. And he probably physically would have lived, he's internal, I call on him all the time, but he physically probably would have lived longer than his 150 registered years. I think it was between 120, 150, conservatively maybe 130-ish. Anyway, he physically lived that long, sourcing energy from young maidens. So he had understood how to alchemize this interconnection, because that's basically how it is. Now, when we understand that you stay at a high frequency, there's no relevance to that type of nature of thought processes. It just doesn't. You don't find it. It's just not there. You're not going to sit there and resonate at a high frequency, but then attempt to try and draw from other people's auric fields. It just doesn't exist. So who knows where he would have been had he not been laid down to his personality and his desire for this ultimate power that he had anyway. He didn't need to go and draw it from another person's physical aura. You can obtain it from the universe. The universe is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And I think that was the distraction of the whisperings of his personality that sort of had him separated in a duality, which is generally how most megalomaniacs fall on their own sword. People like, well, how is it possible the Tao could allow, murderers, rapists, killers, all these type of things? It all comes down to what you believe in. And all these people fall to the same fate. They believe in this psychosis. They get some seed of something that's transmitted that they believe is their reality. But in the back of their unconscious, they truly still understand duality, and that there's a fundamental realization that comes with operating in duality. So if you believe in good and bad and up and down and in and out, the other end of that polarization will find you. That sort of I'm a megaloman, like psychos like Mao or Hitler or whatever. They all end up falling on their own sword because you know why? They stop believing their own rhetoric. When they stop believing it and they go, oh, I know in the back of my mind there's karma here. It's coming. Then their whole empire falls. It happens. It's kind of Roman history, anything from human history. When you look at the fall of some megalomaniac that's controlled a culture, a part of history, their fall has come from their realization that there is what we call a karmic effect. And that is, again, I will preface this, karma is predicated on your own realization of what life is. And people are like, well, what does that mean? Shifu, what does that mean? It means that if you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have good luck, then you're going to have good luck. If you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to have bad luck, you are going to have bad luck. That's how quick the universe serves up the lack of moral compass. But because people want humanist activities and the way they mechanize things, then that's what the universe will give you. If you live in the duality, then it will find you the good, the bad, the up, the down, the ins, the outs. That's part of it. What are your thoughts on that?
Big subjects. Your thoughts create your world. I try to eliminate my thoughts, control my thinking so that I can exist inside the divine, the Tao itself, and not have the presence of my selfish self whispering in my ear, telling me the gains I can have in the world. I instead listen to the voice of the divine that has no sound, so that I can, in Christian language, accumulate my treasure in heaven now and live through that here. So I can't change the thought patterns of other people. So I have to live within what they think and do. But for myself, I aim myself at my origin. I try to limit my emotional responses. I try to respond rather than react. Somebody, stomps on my foot, it hurts. I might get angry, but I try to not react. I try to go back into my breath and be quiet for a moment and then say, you stepped on my foot, as opposed to kapow.
Right. I love what you're saying, Peter, because someone else I just spoke to recently had a very similar. It's like, what was the words? The words were, I'm not going to react, I'm going to act. And so there's a whole different ball game. That's like in a different category. But just that realization, the consciousness of that behavior is a healing right in of itself, because you're aware that it's happening.
For you and the other person.
Yes.
Because if you have this bad interaction or troubling interaction, you're in a grocery store, somebody bumps your cart, or you bump somebody's cart and they drop the cereal box. And this person has a lot of anger inside him or her that has nothing to do with you, but they come at you. If you come back at them, now you're both all crazy and angry. But if you're quiet to them, they may stomp away because they have anger inside them, but it won't be magnified. You won't help magnify their anger. And so you change the course of their life. And the same is true for me. When I don't react, I take my time to respond, to be present first, and then to respond. My day doesn't go askew either. And so we impact the world directly in our relationships with strangers and people that we know.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, your emotions don't control you. You control your emotions. And I mean, it sounds a lot of authoritarians, go to the testosterone based. I tend to just look at it as a mechanism. And, people call it love, Christ consciousness, Tao, God. there are 3 stepping stones that I help people understand to create the default of what love really is. Because on face value, when I say use love to access all things, people are like, okay, that's a subjective thing. Right now, Roger Smith perceives love as razor blades and bunny rabbits, and Mary Lou looks at love as unicorns and rainbows. So we've got this subjective analyses of what love is until otherwise notified, and that comes from a frequency shift. And as you start to ascend to a higher frequency, you start to replicate that into your very breath and life.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, and I don't want it to sound ominous, but you overshadow your personality.
But you do. It's not ominous, not to me.
No, I don't think so. But I mean, when people go overshadow, what does that mean? It just means that you're now living, as Peter would say, in the Tao, in the moment, in the universe, in that energy. And the way that Peter is able to have used his near-death experience to access these portals that are forever open within his internal space is a really profound thing. And of course, part of being a master of divinity has that realization. People come to you because you've been given this insight to help people understand how powerful they are. But it's like you wouldn't have realized that insight was even there if not for consciousness going, yo, now you know what death is like. Now you can share it with the rest of the world. And when you tell one person, they tell 100. When they tell 100, they tell 1,000,000. All of a sudden people are like, did you hear about that near-death experience, that person, that they actually died and they came back? And then, of course, now you have the insight of the alchemy and how you can teach people how to cultivate that. This is sort of a big component, because I make sure that people understand the method is very important, because you have to be able to repeat it. You need to be able to repeat it in your reality. You need to get something out of it. I
had a teacher once, a drama teacher. He taught at the American Academy in New York City. And one day he told me, he said, if you can't do it every night on stage and have the same reaction from the audience, it's not art, because art is repeatable.
Right. Yeah. It's that cultivation practice. It's like absolutely second to none. So now that you have come in full circle in this insight, and you have this mastery and this deeper understanding of the nature of who you are, and this insight, with the time that we have left, I want to talk to you about this. Where now you got this discovery, now you're teaching these people. What is a deep dive into Peter's mastery class, or how someone would acquire these skills that you teach others, and what's sort of like the timeline of this type of programming?
Well, how long are you going to live?
I love it.
Because there's no end to it. I'm still in process myself. I expect my process in this form to end the day that I die and don't come back. But that doesn't mean that the process for my higher self ends there. There's more to go. So
more fundamentally, from someone who's listening to all this, it's like, whoa, everything Peter said to me is resonating with my very experience. Because that's generally my realization in my lifetime, is that most people resonate with me because they've had something similar to, or they're experiencing something like, I once said, it's like that scene out of Wendy's when Harry met Sally. I want it, whatever she's having, that type of thing.
Oh yeah.
So they hear this incredible story of Peter's journey, and they're like, oh my goodness, well, that's me. I'm like literally looking at myself, and even if it's not me, what he's saying is resonating so deep in the core of me that I want to understand how I contain that. Like,
that's really what I'm trying to help people do, and I'm trying to show the more important to me than any of the words that I use or the things that I teach is the energy itself. If I can help a person attune to the divine, the Tao, the Allah, Brahma, whatever name you want to give this unspeakable energy, if they can feel that resonance inside themselves, in my presence, and feel it through my throat, in my voice, perceive it in my eyes, then once they discover that this resonates inside them, then they know that it is inside them. And once they know that it's inside them, they can begin the process of looking there to cultivate that space.
Mm.
And so what I at a very fundamental, easy level of teaching is in the meditation practice is simply to have a mantra or a chant, and it can be sacred or it doesn't have to be sacred. Could be the number 7, because it's a tool to lock with your breath, to repeat 10,000 times in order to have it fall away, where you can just be with your breath and your body. And just by being with your breath and your body, the mind isn't running anymore. It's not emotions. And if there are things arising, they can just pass by because you're not attaching to them. And that quiet space, moment after moment after moment, collected over a lifetime, creates this much larger cistern for the presence of the energy to exist in. And so the effort isn't the pursuit of the energy itself. The effort is the pursuit of the control of the mind. And the control of the mind, when the mind has been controlled enough, then the energy takes care of itself. And then you have this internalized energy that is your guru. It is yourself. And then it can teach you. And that's really what I'm after. I'm trying to help people find this inside themselves, give them some tools to use, or help them with the tools that they're using already, so that then they can find that they have access to this higher self that is their teacher, and let the teacher be the energy itself. So my whole and I spent a lot of time in public speaking. My whole career has been public speaking, either in churches or on television or on radio or now like this. It's always been about the communication of it. But I've been practicing all the way along, not just the words on top. I've been practicing trying to weave the light inside the language so that the language carries the resonance of it, of its own power. And so the techniques that I've begun to teach, we'll see if I can or systematize them enough for people to use them. So far, so good. We've got 50 people keep coming back for 2 years. So that's going okay. They know that it's an experiment. And I make mistakes with teaching. Like for about a year or more, I fire hosed them with every single technique that I developed inside myself. Turns out that that was not a good technique for me to do. So now I'm down to the garden hose. So a very simple thing: when you're breathing into your belly, you're in your meditation. You're breathing in, you expand your belly, and then pause, and then compress your pelvic floor. Use those muscles in your body. If you're sitting, just compress them lightly. As you exhale, keep your mind in that space. Don't try to imagine any colors or anything else. Just feel that space. And then relax it. And then inhale. And then compress it. And then exhale. Use that compression to locate your mind. And now you've got this 3-legged stool. You've got your physical body, you've got your breath, and you've got your chant, all controlling your mind. And then the natural result of that is eventually what happens is that place becomes energized. And then that energy that is rooted now can be moved with your mind and your breath to other locations in your body. For me, I've been practicing the chakra root. I recognize that Judaism has its own energy centers. Some of that overlaps in the Kabbalah, and Qi and Qigong and Tai Chi. There are energy centers that overlap as well. I have this theory, and it's just a theory, that the particular energy maps that we chart inside ourselves, develop and grow depending upon the system that we use. And so the system for me has more of a linear nature to it than a circular nature to it. There's some circular. I studied some martial arts, and there's some circular nature to my practice, but it's primarily directional. And what happens with this practice as I've gained access, um, as I've gained control over my breath and mind to move the energy, to let it sit inside places, then connect them to each other, then expand them to this huge bubble and layer after layer after layer. And that radiance itself then has an impact of its own without me doing anything of the world that I'm in. So I'll use this example. After I died again in 2015, family congenital heart thing, widowmaker heart attack. I ran into my yoga teacher. I would go to the yoga studio in town because it gets lonely doing it by yourself. So for my social life, I go to yoga class, and she invited me back to yoga class. I was like, Sharon, I love you, but I'm not coming back. And she said, why? I said, because I'm practicing on my own again. She said, no, you got to come back. I said, no, I love you guys. But nah, I'm good. And she said, but Peter, when you practice in the studio with us, everybody feels your energy. You change the experience for everybody there. And that's not what I'm doing in my own practice. I'm not trying to do that. I'm merely doing my own thing and letting that thing take care of itself. I felt that when I did that in those studios, but I didn't know that they felt it. I could feel them, I but I didn't know they could feel me because nobody ever told me, and I certainly wasn't gonna ever bring it up because, I don't want, "Oh, so can you feel me, brother? Can you feel?" It's like, well, you've already put the idea in the kid's head. And then how do you know? It's like, so I kept it a secret, and for all these years until people started telling me that they feel it. And now I practice trying to show it. I've always tried to show it, but now I part of my intention is to show it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's that validation that creates another shift of consciousness.
yeah.
And I've I feel like I've been a little bit spoiled in my reincarnation because I've never had a doubt, even from the first moment I immersed myself in this material well over 30 years ago, consciously in this lifetime. I've never had a doubt because I just take it at face value, you
Yeah,
know,
that's the best way to do it.
like childlike in your nature.
Yep.
You just instantly, for me, I'll just look at, that's how I started things. I look at a ritual and overview it, look at it. Okay, cool. Let's go. And, most people will be like, whoa, you need to fast for 40 days. You need to do this. You need to do that.
Yeah, not so much. People
Whereas,
tell me, "Don't drink coffee before you meditate." It's like,
and that transmutation, that ability to transmute anything at will is an art form. One of the trainings that you validate as a priest for your transformation is taking two bodies of water, one that has alcohol in it, you just pour in some vodka, and the other one has water. And part of your passing of this first test is you move the alcohol out of the first body of water, which is perceived as vodka, and you drop it into the glass of water. And you're like, yeah, right. And literally, you could have someone now. This body of water alcohol would be this big, this wide, and you will scull it. And
you'll what?
you will scull the previous body of water that supposedly has vodka in it. Now, if it still had vodka in it and you didn't remove the alcohol, you're going to have a bad trip. You're going to have a bad experience consuming that much concentrated liquor
Mhm.
in 5 seconds. Unless you're a career alcoholic, you are going to have a miserable time. And so part of the measuring of that validation within a 3D reality is being able to consume that. Now, moreover, lately over the last couple of years, I do this with all different types of transmutations, but now I get a little bit more curious where I want to, it's so mind blowing to me after all these years that sometimes I want to just test the water, even though it's like, oh, okay, I noticed you just poured in, Grey Goose straight from the bottle into this large glass that would be equivalent to probably half a bottle. And once you remove it, you remove it. Next course of action is to drink. And you will know whether you have removed it or not in about a few seconds. Either you're going to be on a gurney in the emergency room to get your stomach pumped, or you're going to have a bad trip, or you're just going to be as if you just drank a glass of H2O. So there's like this whole knowing component that comes with that palpable sort of like realization. And that comes down to transferring it into this reality that's so critical. It's critical. It's really, and however that comes, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't experience that. That's not my journey. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be your journey. If you can shift someone's consciousness with a hello,
Yeah.
that's it. That's all you need. Because that, interestingly enough, human beings are so absent of any validation or any value in their lives that just a hello to someone is giving them hope. Is giving them oh my goodness, this person cares enough about me that they've actually recognized me as being another living being in this very space. And they asked me, they said hello. They did one step further. They asked me, how am I doing? And so, this is the magical stuff that we speak of. And this type of stuff is the way Peter talks about how he cultivates the words and the energetics beneath the words, understanding that would be moreover something that we would call incantations, where you're infusing this very linguistic with a much deeper nature of the frequency. And that comes in all forms, more simply put, spells in of itself. But linguistics is sort of something that you can naturally echo because of people's deeper understanding. If you validate this just by me telling you that you're on a deeper level, everything about you is words, numbers, symbols, letters, all integrated deep within you at a subatomic level. Moreover, you could have someone validated and say that through the miracle of new world science, that discovery of a DNA strand back in the 60s, realizing they were more than flesh and blood, that this realization is on a deeper level. These are all embedded into the DNA strand that you possess as your signature, your echoing reckoning of your individuality within the field. Words, letters, symbols, numbers, they're all integrated into that. And so, you could either believe it or not believe it, but to realize this, when I speak on something and it resonates through your whole body, because the linguistics are the power that you have, all things are realized. And, you do that. It's like people talk about traditional sort of trances, hypnosis, whatever. Gone are the pendulum and the look into my eyes, watch the mesmer sort of like ideas of nonverbal hypnosis. That's very, technically, if I had to validate that, I would say that I'm doing that all the time, but I wouldn't even call it that. That's part of it, just a consciousness. But, if you speak a certain language, it will feed into their unconscious almost instantaneous. Well, it is instantaneous. And they don't even realize that you're doing it, which, oh my goodness, is that horrible? Is that good or bad? I don't know. Don't listen to news. Don't listen to the radio. Don't watch TV, because you're being programmed every day. You're being programmed to have an epiphany that you would realize as a deja vu, where you've had that information poured into your unconscious at a peripheral that's been going on for decades. And so then all of a sudden people are like, oh, how is that possible? How quickly can I access my consciousness? I went and bought a red car. I drove down the street and I just saw 47 red cars. Oh, you just brought it to the attention of the universe. And the universe is like, here, let me show you. You wanted more red cars. Here they are. Or, from a psychologist, hypnotherapist sort of aspect of realization, you would call it the RAS, reticular activative system, is how we acquire this data stream of unconscious, which is, again, anyone that comes from neurology, biology, physiology, neuroscience. I mean, the list goes on. You're very limited in of itself. If you've got a DR or a PhD at the end of your name, I am a little skeptical. It's just part of understanding that you've learned a certain skill and you don't see outside of that skill. And that's generally what academia sort of does. It trains you in that. That's why your story is so interesting to me, because you entered into that space, but evolved well past the boundaries, which happens to be one of the things that you really fundamentally work on. Yet your expansion of consciousness goes well beyond what a boundary would be sort of considered within a learnt processes.
Oh, way beyond.
Right.
To the point of rejection by them, which is okay. I have it's to let them be who they are, and I am who I am.
Right. And
But you reminded me, before I go, you reminded me a similar experience, but very different. When I was at divinity school, I got invited by a Catholic priest, to do this mass. And at the end of the mass, the chalice was filled with wine. It was a big chalice, and it must have been, 3 glasses of wine inside there. And he said to me, "You have to drink it." I said, "What?" Is that I chugged this thing, and I was drunk by the time I was halfway down the aisle. I was like, "Oh my God." Anyway, if I could have moved the alcohol out of it, I would have.
I guarantee you today, you could absolutely. I attribute it to an analogy I call it the Mr. Miyagi effect. And people are like, what is that? Because I'll train people in things and they'll be like, well, what was Sifu, Shifu, Jiaofu, however you want to call me. Why are you getting me to do this? Means nothing. I've just read the scripture 47,000 times. There's 81 verses. How much am I supposed to get out of this? It's like, it seems to me to be the same, yet it's not. It's a living scripture. And you sort of have an understanding of where that person is in their level of consciousness. And I'm like, and then they go, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, oh, really? Here we go. Daniel-san. He's like,
Yeah,
what?
right.
Wax on, wax off. And then, oh, boo, wow. That was all being developed at a level that was beyond you even having to process.
Yeah.
And it's yours forever. And so I use the Pinto analogy. And you go from Mr. Miyagi to Pinto. What are you
The
talking
Ford
about?
Pinto? Or
You're
the Pinto
driving
Bean?
around, you're driving around the Ford Pinto, and then all of a sudden, I tell you to get out of your car, and you're like, okay, I'm out of my car. Go to the hood. Okay, this is some PS Pinto that I'm driving around with, a 4-cylinder, 2-cylinder, whatever. It's just barely getting me by. Open the hood. Okay, pull. There's a Lamborghini engine under the hood. Where did that come from? Oh, we have been mastering that for a long time. And that's where Peter and I talk about us agreeing with this consensus of this development that you acquire. It doesn't leave you. And so even if you're not going, oh, I need to focus my attention on levitating or creating telekinesis or psychokinesis or some form of like clairsense or do the list. When you put your intention to the list of all these things we just spoke on, you'll be pleasantly surprised that all of a sudden you have access to something that you never thought was possible. I always give someone, it's like, okay, you've done a couple of weeks of training, cultivating yourself. Here, take a spoon. They're like, what do you want me to do with it? Bend it. What? What are you talking about? There's no way I could do that. And always the ground level stuff is, I'm going to take it with 2 hands. Now bend it. I can't bend this thing. I can't move it. Okay. Now I need you to shift into the consciousness that you've been developing. Okay. I'm holding the spoon. And when I put my attention to the middle of the spoon, its whole fundamental profile changes and it turns to butter. And they go from that to, ooh. And they're like, holy crap. And then they take the spoon. 3 seconds later, it's shifted back to its original form. And they're like, I can't bend this thing. How is that possible? Now that's ground level. Then you get forks or spoons and you look at it and it melts like butter because that's your intention. But you must be at one. This stuff doesn't work unless you are at one. Like, and that goes for manifestation, healing, magic. It doesn't matter what it is, but there's a palpable shift that you feel when it happens. Now, whether you have a clear sense that's developed to see the aura of it doesn't really matter because the feeling is undeniable. And I always tell people, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. So even as those senses are developing, the clear senses of visually seeing things, that feeling is second to none. It is you can't dismiss it or deny it. And so you will feel that shift in that consciousness, and all of a sudden, what you thought was impossible becomes possible. And that goes across all levels. But yeah, it's like that next level is bending the spoon. And then finally, the graduate level is taking the fork and bending the prongs in either direction, however you choose to. I mean, that also starts with the palpability of that transmission of energy that you perceive as your eyes, which is really, just a focal point. You start with 2 candles and you get someone to focus on each flame and then move between the flames and manipulate the flames and how they move. And then you go, holy crap, where's all this energy coming from? It's always been there. You're just like cultivating it and concentrating it. What do you say on that, Peter? Have you used any sort of techniques like that?
No, I've focused my entire life aiming not at the physical world, but at the interior world in order to reattach myself to the divine nature to the best of my ability. And that includes my understanding, because when I was dead, I saw all of my incarnations were simultaneous, and I was none of them. I was living them, but I was above them. And so my entire focus has been uh, with an understanding of the temporality of this existence, and my task, unlike others like yourself, is simply to try to be that, not use it in the world, let it use me. Um, that's all of it is one.
Mm-hmm.
And but my focus has been over here. It's sort of, I guess it's sort of like the archery master who could, with a blindfold on, could hit the target, versus the Bach who was writing music. The energy is the same energy. It's just a different application.
Oh, and that's the thing that I wanted to hear from you, because it is. I mean, when you say you don't operate on the outside world, well, to perform something in that 3D reality, you must access the eternal
Yeah, you have to.
consciousness to alter a 3D reality. So it just sort of comes in different forms. And I mean, that's really where it is, whether that's that, or you give someone a psychic reading, or a past life reading, or a healing, or I mean, it's all part and parcel. Half a
It's all
dozen
one.
the other one.
So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
It is all one. It's all one. Well, my friend, in closing, before you go, I want to ask you a question I ask everyone. What is your definition of consciousness?
No, I have no definition of consciousness. If I'm talking about my human consciousness, well, as it's expressed here, well, yeah, I can talk about being awake and feeling things and thinking. But if I'm talking about my original consciousness, it's indefinable.
Mhm.
It's energetic. It inhabits my body. I inhabit my body. And this inhabitation of my body will end, and I'll go back to my original self, as I did when I was dead, which has, in that space, I was many things. The first thing I was all of my thinking was my being. My senses, my thinking, my action. I was one energy, and this energy was not made of molecules or electromagnetic forces. It was way beyond that, outside of those things. So that's the best answer I can give on short notice.
I think that's amazing because everyone has their own way up the mountain. And before we leave, I would like, I'm going to put all your social under this. And normally on YouTube, we have this incredible journey that can be, 100 views to 6,000 views. But on all platforms, we go into the thousands. That's where the secret sauce comes in. But I, quite frankly, if I get 100 people to watch one of my videos, which we're at an hour 40 right now,
It's
I'm
long.
I mean, I'm beyond mind blown that someone would dedicate that amount of time to experience what it is that we're sharing. So it blows my mind, and quite frankly, it seems to be more common because the information that we're sharing here on this platform is to shift someone's consciousness, and they find something from the very conversation that you and I are having that evokes that. And so, in closing, I would like you to share with the audience what's going on with Peter right now. What are you offering?
I Right now I'm working with a couple of Hollywood producers to finish the film that I had signed a contract on for my book that is well underway now. So I've been working on that for several years, and now we're about to begin the next stage, which is attaching a director, a scriptwriter, and a lead actor. So that's going great. I'm offering to people uh, help integrating their mystical experiences. People have strange experiences they don't know who to turn to, can't talk about it to their family. I'm your guy. I've spent my life integrating mine, and I've spent my life helping people integrate theirs. So peterpanagore.love, come and say hello. I have a YouTube channel where I do exploration of cross-cultural mysticism. I teach meditation and Kriya yoga.
Amazing. Amazing, my friend. So I'm going to put all that social under here. People know where to find you. I want the audience to go out and explore Peter's offerings because, I mean, that's what this is about. I've never understood this whole social media thing. I've only been at it about 7 months now, and what a mind blower. I feel like people like yourself and myself that are sharing and being able to show people levels of consciousness, we tend to fall prey to this sort of monopolization of someone that can gain clicks through our experiences, our stories, and whatnot. And I'm like, I kind of just prefer to just do it myself. So I'm gathering tens, if not close to 100 practitioners of individual sort of any type of healing, and I'm creating a consciousness expo at the end of this year. And I'd like to invite you. And if you're around, if that's available, that's your thing. You should definitely see what it's like to come out here because the collective awareness and sharing with people is really where you make a difference. So and I want people to understand. I sort of come from a background where the energy of money has never been something that's really driven me, yet it's very easy to obtain that because that's just my manifestation and how I realize things. But a lot of people in this space are suffering to the inability to generate their very mastery into what we call this energy that's a resource that you use to transact in this 3D reality. So I want to create an environment where you can be compensated more for your skill set that is not being offered. And most people can't seem to find it. I mean, I got students that have $750,000 worth of debt, but they're a doctor and have 87 pieces of paper on how they can heal this, that, and something else. Yet they couldn't squeeze out $40 an hour for their time. This is a problem. And we need to change that. And it definitely has to do with the seed of their reality and how they perceive the value of themselves. And this is the journey that I'm on to help awaken that value within everyone.
It's admirable.
Yeah, I mean that's really the main catalyst for me because people need to realize that anything is possible. And so when people are in this space and they're sharing their experiences and their mastery, they still need to pay their bills and put the lights on and do all that kind of good stuff. And it seems to be the hurdle that most people get into. Well, this should be handed out. It's not something that someone should pay for. And I'm like, I'm coin operated, my friend. So it is very relevant that you understand that this information is for your realization and consciousness, but compensating the person who's facilitating that should not be unreasonable, in my opinion.
Me too. I mean, as a clergy person, I was paid for my work.
Right.
Not paid as well as the rabbis I knew,
Right.
but paid well enough.
Right.
And I think that every practitioner who gives value to the client or the student deserves compensation.
Amen to that, brother. Amen. On that, I want to thank you. I'm very grateful to the universe, to the Tao, to God, to Jesus. How we have met in this ether is nothing short of a coincidence, a miracle, but I'm more than grateful that you are now a new friend. I feel the bond.
Mm.
And friendship will blossom from moment to moment. But again, thank you for coming into my life. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master Sun Qing, and I will see you on the next one, guys.